Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. In the Gaza Strip, at least 40 Palestinians were killed, scores more injured this morning as an Israeli strike ripped through a tent encampment housing displaced Palestinians near Khan Yunis. Israel had designated the area as a so-called safe zone. Witnesses say at least 4 missiles ripped through the crowded camp as people slept, engulfing tents in flames, scattering body parts. The United Nations says its efforts to vaccinate hundreds of thousands of Palestinian children against polio were further delayed after members of a UN convoy were detained by Israel's military at gunpoint for more than 8 hours Monday in northern Gaza. This is UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk.
Ending the war and averting a full-blown regional conflict is an absolute and urgent priority. Equally, the wider situation of illegality across the occupied Palestinian territory, deriving from Israel's policies and practices, as so clearly spelled out by the International Court of Justice in its advisory opinion in July, must be comprehensively addressed.
Monday marked the traditional first day of school in Gaza, but for a second year in a row, classes are canceled for all of Gaza's school children. ActionAid Palestine said in a statement, quote, "Going to school is not a luxury, it's a fundamental right, and yet hundreds of thousands of children in Gaza are being denied an education for the second academic year in a row. A whole generation is being denied the opportunity to learn and build a better future for themselves," unquote. In the occupied West Bank, mourners held a funeral procession Monday for the Turkish-American activist Ayşenur Ezgi, who was fatally shot in the head by Israeli forces Friday while she joined a protest against illegal Israeli settlements in the town of Beita. Witnesses say she was killed by an Israeli sniper after the demonstration had already dispersed. This is Lulu, another U.S. activist in the West Bank.
Very saddened by this. My heart and my thoughts are with her family, and we as volunteers here, we feel her loss, but we're not scared off by the Israelis. We are not scared off by this attack. We will continue to stay here in solidarity with the Palestinians for as long as we live, no matter what happens.
Ayşenur's family is calling on the Biden administration to order an independent investigation into the unlawful killing of a U.S. citizen and to ensure full accountability. On Monday, the State Department appeared to rule out a U.S.-led probe, saying it would wait for the results of an Israeli investigation.
I think most important is to let this process play out, for the facts to be gathered and for those to come to light. And I will just leave it at that.
To see our coverage of Ayşenur Ezgi's killing and growing calls for justice around her death, visit democracynow.org. Russia's military says it shot down 144 drones launched from Ukraine at targets inside Russia in an overnight wave of attacks that killed a 46-year-old woman in her Moscow home. 3 others were injured as the blast tore through a high-rise apartment building early this morning, setting other residential buildings on fire. Witnesses described a chaotic scene.
We were asleep. I got up to go to work. I looked through the window and saw a ball of fire. I had just a second to cover my spouse with a blanket. The window got smashed out by a shockwave.
Everything is messed up there.
We were in shock. I grabbed whatever was nearby, children, the dog, everything, and ran away because we thought that our home would collapse as well.
Ukrainian officials have yet to comment on their latest drone attacks on Russia. On Monday, NATO warned Moscow over violations of Latvian and Romanian airspace by Russian drones, calling them irresponsible and potentially dangerous. Latvian officials said they recovered wreckage of an Iranian-designed Shahed drone that crashed 60 miles from Latvia's border with Belarus on Saturday. Meanwhile, Sweden's government says it's preparing to transfer Saab fighter jets to Ukraine as part of an increase in Swedish arms shipments. Texas is suing the Biden administration over federal privacy rules that bar investigators from viewing medical records of patients who travel out of state to have an abortion. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton says the rule creates a, quote, backdoor attempt at weakening Texas's laws, unquote, which ban nearly all abortions. In Missouri, an amendment that could undo the state's near-total abortion ban is at risk of being removed from the ballot after a Missouri judge ruled Friday the campaign to get the ballot measure did not sufficiently explain the amendment in the signature-gathering phase. Missourians for Constitutional Freedom, the group behind the ballot measure, is arguing its case today before the state Supreme Court, which will need to make an immediate decision since today is also the deadline for any ballot changes before they're printed for mail-in voters. Meanwhile, the Nebraska Supreme Court heard arguments Monday in lawsuits against two separate abortion ballot measures. Nebraska currently has a 12-week abortion ban. And in more related news, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' election police unit has been investigating voters who signed ballot petitions for Amendment 4, Florida's abortion rights measure, which would toss out the state's 6-week abortion ban. Since it was formed in 2022, DeSantis' so-called election police have been deployed to intimidate voters, in particular, likely Democratic voters. The Justice Department has charged two leaders of a white supremacist group alleging they plotted to assassinate at least one U.S. senator and a district court judge. Dallas Humber of Elk Grove, California, and Matthew Allison of Boise, Idaho, each face 15 counts of soliciting hate crimes and providing material support to terrorism. Kristen Clark is head of the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division.
The defendant's goal, the indictment charges, was to ignite a race war, accelerate the collapse of what they viewed as an irreparably corrupt government, and bring about a white ethno-state.
Republican vice presidential nominee J.D. Vance is escalating his racist anti-immigrant rhetoric, this time targeting the Haitian community in his home state of Ohio. On Monday, Vance wrote on the social media site X, quote, "Reports now show that people have had their pets abducted and eaten by people who shouldn't be in this country. Where is our border czar?" he asked. The Trump campaign piled on to the bizarre right-wing misinformation campaign, writing, quote, "President Trump will deport migrants who eat pets," unquote. The first and currently only scheduled debate between Trump and Kamala Harris is happening tonight on ABC News. You can watch the debate at democracynow.org and tune in tomorrow on Democracy Now! For a recap and analysis of the debate. In Georgia, students at most Barrow County schools are returning to classrooms today, nearly a week after a 14-year-old with an assault rifle shot and killed two other 14-year-old students and two teachers, injuring 9 others. Classes at Appalachia High School, where the shooting took place, remain canceled. The Washington Post reports the mother of the suspected shooter contacted the school on the morning of the shooting and warned a counselor about an extreme emergency involving her son about a half hour before the first shots were fired. The warning reportedly came after her son texted her the message, quote, "I'm sorry, Mom." Separate text messages also revealed the family was in contact with school officials about the boy's mental health a week before the massacre. Authorities in California and Nevada have issued mandatory evacuation orders for tens of thousands of people as an intense heat wave grips large swaths of the Southwest. Fast-moving wildfires are burning south of Reno in Nevada and in California's San Bernardino County, Orange County, and at the foothills of LA's National Forest, as well as in Northern California's Lake County. UCLA climate scientist Daniel Swain said extreme fire behavior has also been observed in Oregon, Idaho, and Wyoming. In tech news, Google and Apple are facing billions of dollars in fines after losing their respective appeals against the European Union. The European Court of Justice ruled Apple must pay 13 billion euros in back taxes to Ireland in a legal case that spanned 10 years as it went through the appeals process. Separately, Google must pay a 2.4 billion euro fine for favoring its own price comparison shopping service over its rivals. This comes as Google's second major antitrust suit brought by President Biden's Justice Department kicked off Monday. At issue is Google's monopoly over the digital advertising industry. Last month, a federal judge ruled Google operated an illegal monopoly in the online search industry. In Florida, the Miami-Dade Police Department has released footage showing how officers stopped and handcuffed Miami Dolphins star Tyreek Hill as he drove to Sunday's game. The video reveals officers rapidly escalated the situation from a simple traffic stop to a violent detention, twice pressing Hill face down into the pavement, handcuffed.
Get out of the car right now. We're not playing this game. Get out. 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 What part of law don't you understand?
Statement the Miami Dolphins wrote, "It is both maddening and heartbreaking to watch the very people we trust to protect our community use such unnecessary force and hostility towards these players. Yet it's also a reminder that not every situation like this ends in peace, as we're grateful this one did. What if I wasn't Tyreek Hill is a question that will carry with resounding impact," they wrote. Another Dolphins player, Calais Campbell, who came to de-escalate the situation, was also handcuffed. And legendary actor James Earl Jones has died at the age of 93. He took on iconic blockbuster roles like Star Wars' Darth Vader and Lion King's Mufasa, and is also remembered for films like The Great White Hope and Matewan, about the 1920 coal miner strike in West Virginia. Though he became well known for his commanding, booming voice, James Earl Jones overcame a stutter that he said was so debilitating as a child, he sometimes pretended to be nonverbal for years. In 2003, Jones read the Frederick Douglass speech, "What to the Slave is the 4th of July," during a performance of Voices of People's History of the United States, which was co-edited by the late historian Howard Zinn.
What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him more than all other days of the year the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is a constant victim.
We will play more of this performance in Peoples of a History of the United States, James Earl Jones reading the speech of the abolitionist and former enslaved person Frederick Douglass later in the broadcast. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report.